Welcome to Sos Talks Money on Valuetainment. I'm your host, Adam Sosnick, and I'm here to help you build your wealth and save that money. On today's episode, we're going to be breaking down Joe Biden's economic plan and what it means for you and your finances. Let's talk money.
All we talk is money. All we talk is money. All we talk is money. All we talk is money.
All right, so off top, let me start off by saying that we're going to go under the assumption that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. If for some reason Trump pulls a rabbit out of the hat and becomes president, then completely disregard this entire episode. So we're going to be making a few assumptions during this episode, and something that you guys should know at home. I don't care if you're on the left, I don't care if you're on the right, Republican, if you voted for Trump, if you voted for Biden. This is not a political segment whatsoever. It is all about your money. Something that you should be aware of as this new presidency takes shape, how this will affect your finances. So let's understand where a Joe Biden presidency will mean for the economy, another round of stimulus, and your finances. So here's a quote that Joe Biden said as soon as he was elected into office. He says, Joe Biden says, we are facing a health crisis, an economic crisis, a racial justice crisis, and climate crisis. We need to come together to solve these crises as Americans. So there you have it. He painted a picture of the crises that Americans are currently facing. All right, what else are we facing? We're facing high unemployment, we're facing low inflation, and we're facing zero interest rates right now in the economy. Top that all off with a spike in COVID cases, and literally winter is now coming like it's freaking Game of Thrones, because we are in mid-November and the weather ain't getting any warmer. So we'll see what happens with COVID. That, of course, is the big question on everyone's mind. Let's talk about the political challenges that Joe Biden is likely to be facing. Again, in this episode, we're making a few assumptions. Assumption number one is that Joe Biden is actually the president. Okay, we can assume that. Number two, let's talk about the assumption that we will more than likely have a divided Congress. What does that mean? It means that the GOP, the Republican Party, is more than likely going to have a slim majority in the Senate. All eyes are on Georgia. Georgia is on all our minds, like Ray Charles once said. And here's why: because they're going to have a couple Senate runoffs in early January. Assuming those play out the way they're looking to play out, even if one or possibly two seats go to the GOP, Republicans will more than likely hold the Senate. Now, on the other hand, Democrats have a slim majority in the House. We saw that during the midterm elections of 2018. They had a big win for the House. They lost a few seats during the 2020 election, but they still hold the House. The GOP likely to hold the Senate. And obviously, Joe Biden, a Democrat, looks to be the president of the United States. What does that all mean for Wall Street? Well, Wall Street, not sure if you know this or not, Wall Street actually likes gridlock. They like the fact that we have a Democratic president, that we have a Democratic House, but we also have a potential GOP Senate, because it keeps things in check. They like gridlock. We saw under Trump with a Republican president and a Republican Senate and a Democratic House that the market did just fine. So the stock market actually likes gridlock. Now, where do we stand as far as GDP, gross domestic product, as far as right now? Well, in Q2, we got absolutely crushed. The GDP plummeted 31%, but in Q3, we bounced back 33%. Now we are in Q4, and we're wondering what the hell's going on now that we have a new president coming into the White House. So what I've done behind you is I've broken down the 10 things that you need to be paying attention to regarding a Biden economic plan. So let's jump into this top 10 right now. So topic number one is climate change. As you can see behind me, climate is number one, and I didn't put that number one because I feel that way. I actually put it in alphabetical order just because we know people are going to say, well, why do you think that this is more important than this and this and this? It's all in alphabetical order, as you can see. So climate change is number one, and Joe Biden has said, quote unquote, climate change is the number one issue facing humanity. How do you feel about that? Is that something that you think is the number one issue that we are facing as Americans or as humans walking around this globe right now? Is climate change number one? Well, according to Joe Biden, that is number one. Now, he put together a plan. What's that plan called? It's called the Clean energy revolution. Now, what's going to happen in this revolution? He basically put together a $2 trillion plan to make America invest into clean energy. What else is Joe Biden going to do? He definitely says he's going to re-enter the Paris Climate Accord. Trump made breaking news as soon as he became president in 2016, and he completely exited the Paris Climate Accord. How do you feel about Biden re-entering the Climate Accord? Please leave your comments below when it comes to that. He also says he's going to spend $400 billion on renewable energy research. And watch out if you are in the oil or gas sectors, because that's something that he's going to be cracking down on when it comes to pollution and certainly cars polluting the environment. That's Joe Biden's stance on climate. What else? Last but not least, what are his goals? His goals are to become 100% a clean energy economy by 2035. His second goal is to have zero net emissions by 2050. Now, what is some of the pushback that Joe Biden is receiving? Well, on the left, on his own party, on the left side of the Democratic Party, you got people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Elizabeth Warren that are upset that he didn't go bigger. Obviously, they're fans of the Green New Deal, the GND. They wanted him to go bigger and spend more on climate change. And then you got the Republicans like, whoa, buddy, relax. They don't want to go too big on climate change. So that's number one, everything that you need to understand when it comes to Joe Biden's number one thing, climate. Moving right along, let's talk about number two. We'll move along to healthcare. When it comes to healthcare, you know Joe Biden has his homeboy Barack Obama's back. What does he want to do? He wants to protect the ACA, aka Obamacare. And what does he want to do? He wants to provide a Medicare-like public option. If you don't know about Medicare, it's usually for people 65 and older, but he wants to spread it out for everybody. However, he does not believe in universal health care. We'll touch on that in a second. What else does he want to do? He wants to lower the max out-of-pocket coverage from 9.8% down to 8.5%, aka you won't have to spend as much on your health care out of pocket. He wants to lower drug prices. I think that's something everyone's down for. And what he also wants to do is he wants to end what is known as surprise billing. Surprise, mother sucker. Surprise, a bill you get from an out-of-network provider. Wrapping this part up, let's talk about what's going on with COVID. Here are the things he wants to do when it comes to COVID. He wants to provide free testing. He wants to distribute PPE all across the country. He wants mass scale contact tracing. And last but not least, he wants paid leave for sick workers. So if you're sick and you have to miss work, at least you'll still be making some income due to COVID. Last but not least, which we touched on in the beginning, he is not for universal health care, aka Medicare for all, that the ultra left wing of the party is calling for. Biden has said it is too costly. Save that money. Let's move on to number three. The number three thing is immigration. This was something that Trump harped on like crazy. He wanted to build the wall. He didn't want illegal immigrants coming to America. Now, Joe Biden has a complete different take when it comes to immigration. Let's break that down. He wants to have sweeping immigration reform. What does that mean exactly? Basically, he wants to introduce a pathway to citizenship for Dreamer or DACA recipients and undocumented immigrants who what? Pay their taxes. Cha-ching. That's money coming into the United States. He also wants to invest $4 billion into Latin American countries so they feel safe enough not to have to leave their homeland and come to the United States. So that's what he wants to do for Latin America. Last but not least, he would reverse some of Trump's executive actions, i.e. a travel ban on certain Muslim countries. He would actually increase immigrants and refugees from other countries. And last but not least, he would increase H-1B visas, which are basically visas for high-skilled foreign workers. Respect on that. So what's his plan? What's his plan when it comes to overall immigration? Well, let me tell you. He, number one, wants to boost the population. Interesting. Boost the population. He wants to boost the labor supply, aka workers. He wants to increase consumer spending, spend that money. And he also wants to increase productivity. So that's Joe Biden's plan when it comes to immigration. Number 4 on this list is income inequality. Not sure you know this, but check any article out there. They're saying that income inequality is the highest it's been in 50 years. Obviously, with COVID going on, the rich are getting richer, the poor are struggling. This is known as the K-shaped economy. Check it out for yourselves. Well, Joe Biden wants to devote $100 billion in low-interest loans to local communities of color. He also wants to set up $50 billion in startup capital for entrepreneurs of color. He wants to invest $70 billion into HBCUs, which are historically black college and universities. And he also wants to establish a federal commission on reparations. Very interesting. Would love to know your thoughts on that. I know that's a very controversial topic. Now, when it comes to college and student loans, let's address that before we move on. What does Joe Biden want to do? But he wants to introduce 4 years of free college, public university to families who are making under $125,000 a year. That's not poor people. $125,000 for a family of 4, that's very middle class. Interesting. So he basically wants to expand college in America. He will also provide 100% loan forgiveness if you are paying responsibly for 20 years. Responsibly, drink responsibly. We know that people talk about that. They want you to pay responsibly your student loans. He will also cut your payments in half of your discretionary income from 10% to as low as 5% of what you actually have to pay back when it comes to your student loans. And last but not least, he's willing to forgive $10,000 in federal student loans. Moving on to the next topic, number 5 is infrastructure. What does Joe Biden want to do? Well, Joe Biden has a plan called the Build Back Better. Build Back Better is Joe Biden's plan. His proposal is $7 trillion over the next 10 years of spending that is more than likely to get chopped up in half if it ever gets to Congress. What does Joe Biden want to do? Well, he wants to upgrade roads, bridges, and highways, and also he wants to implement a high-speed rail system here in America, and he's relying on a public and private partnership in order to do that. One more topic that's important to bring up when it comes to infrastructure, let's talk about housing. Joe Biden wants to invest $640 billion into affordable housing. I'm cool with that. He also wants to end redlining and discriminatory practices when it comes to housing. And what else does he want to do? He wants to provide housing vouchers so families don't have to pay more than 30% of their income in rent. I talk about all this all the time. You want to keep your rent below 30% of your income. So I'm actually cool with Biden on that. So that's what he has to discuss when it comes to infrastructure. Let's move on to number 6. Number 6 on the list is labor, AKA jobs. So what does Joe Biden want to do with that? Well, just like Trump has slogans like America First, Joe Biden has a couple other slogans that he would like to introduce that hopefully catch on. He's touting made in all of America and by American. I'm not sure if that's too original, but those are Joe Biden's slogan, and that's what he's standing by. He would like to spend $700 billion to create 5 million jobs in manufacturing and tech innovation. I'll say that again. 5 million jobs in manufacturing and tech innovation. If you're looking for a job, this might not be a bad career to look into. He wants to also create 100,000 new jobs in the public health sector. And then here's the big one, just in case you haven't been paying attention. He wants to increase the federal minimum wage up to $15 an hour. The current federal minimum wage is $7.25, so almost doubling it. So what's the purpose of that? He would like to boost the income of 30 million low-wage workers. Now listen, I haven't been giving my opinions too much about any of this stuff. I've been going straight down the line, but here's why I will interject. I will tell you, I am not exactly a huge fan of increasing the minimum wage on a federal level across the United States. I actually agree in certain expensive cities, certain, high-cost states, New York, California, Florida, for example, just passed the $15 minimum wage. I'm cool with that. But you don't need to be making $15 an hour in bumblefuck Oklahoma. So that's a little point of controversy. Would love to get your perspective on that point right there. So that's the minimum wage argument. Moving right along, this is probably the biggest thing on the board, but we had to do it in alphabetical order. So let's address the stimulus. This is the big question on everyone's mind. What will happen with another round of stimulus? Just to recap it, where we last left off, the Democrats are proposing a $2 trillion or more stimulus package, while the Republicans are saying, homie, let's keep it below $1 trillion. My guess is they'll somehow meet in the middle at $1.5 trillion. That's my assumption. We'll see if that happens. We all know what's been happening over the last 6 months since they passed the first stimulus pass. There's been ongoing negotiations, left, right, up, down. It's just been at a complete impasse. But when this does happen, what will this second round of stimulus center around? Well, we know that there'll be likely more stimulus checks, more federal unemployment boosts. They will likely extend the PPP, that's the Paycheck Protection Program. And last but not least, they will provide aid to cities and states. So that's what's on the radar when it comes to stimulus. Moving right along, let's talk about number 8, taxes, taxes, taxes. This is maybe the biggest part on here that's debatable. What is Joe Biden's intentions when it comes to taxes? Well, it's pretty obvious. He's going after high earners, and he would like to reverse the Trump 2017 corporate tax cuts. Let's get into the numbers right now. Now, when it comes to raising taxes, here's the number that you need to keep in mind. The number is $400,000. If you make more than $400,000, your taxes will likely go up. If you make less than $400,000, your taxes will likely stay the same. What else is on the agenda? Well, he would like to increase the top rate from 37% to 39%. So if you're making more than $500,000, $600,000, whether you're single or you're married, you're in the top 1%, top tax bracket, then you'll likely go up from 37 to 39.6%. Now, what else does he like to do? He would like to increase the corporate tax rate up from 21 to 28. I know if you're a corporation, you are not happy about this. If you own a corporation, would love to get your thoughts on this. Maybe, just maybe, if Republicans fight this, we'll see what happens in Congress. Maybe they meet in the middle and they call it 24%. We shall see. This won't happen easily in Congress. Last but not least, he would like to increase the capital gains from 23.8% up to 39.6% if you make more than $1 million in income. Let me just tell you, if you're making more than $1 million in income and you're watching this channel, respect to you, brother or sister. Side note, you know for a fact, just like I have right here, the GOP will fight this like crazy. We talked at the beginning of this that Republicans will more than likely control the Senate. Again, it's an assumption, but if they do not expect taxes to change too much. We shall see how that plays out. Moving right along, let's talk about tech, aka big tech. When we're talking about big tech, we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Apple, we're talking about Google, we're talking about Twitter. And what are they talking about with that? They certainly have been under scrutiny over the last few years. Facebook, Google, Twitter, as we discussed. Both sides of the aisle on Congress are not exactly happy with big tech, and they are definitely not cool with their unchecked powers. Let's get into what Biden is thinking. Biden supports revoking Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which basically shields social media companies from content its users post. So basically, what does that mean? Right now, social media companies are sort of exempt. If someone on their platform says something ridiculous or outlandish or racist, they're like, look, I didn't say that. What Biden is looking to do is maybe say, buddy, you're responsible for this. That might be a slippery slope. We'll see how that plays out. Obviously, the big elephant in the room when it comes to social media is Facebook. Facebook also owns Instagram. The Democrats and Joe Biden feel that Facebook does not do enough to police disinformation, whereas you have on the Republican side of things, on the right, they believe that they're censoring their content. So that's what's going on with this Section 230 of this Communications Decency Act. Last but not least, Biden says breaking up big tech would be a last resort option. We'll see what happens with that. Rounding the curve, so to speak, let's end up at number 10, which is trade. This has obviously been a hot button issue under the Trump administration. Trump went hard on trade. What did he go hard on? He went hard on allies. He went hard on international organizations. He went hard on border taxes and imports. And he went even harder on China. Now, what does Biden have to say when it comes to trade? Well, Joe Biden has not indicated that he will reverse what Trump has put in place when it comes to tariffs on $360 billion worth of Chinese goods. Let me say that again. Biden might not change what Trump has done when it comes to tariffs on Chinese goods. What he is looking to do is reset America's role as an ally and leader on the world stage. And what would he like to do when it comes to China? Well, his intentions are aggressive action on China, but, and here's the but, he would like his allies to team up to confront them, not doing it alone. That is known as multilateralism. lateralism. So that's your top 10 when it comes to things you need to look out when it comes to a Joe Biden economic plan. Now, here are actually my biggest takeaways from what we just uncovered. It's pretty clear that number one, Joe Biden is focusing on low and middle income households that have been the hardest hit during the pandemic. A lot of his policies are here to help average Americans get by. That's pretty obvious if you look at any of his proposals. Also, this is the most ambitious climate change proposal we have ever seen. That's number two. Number three, Joe Biden is actually not going too far left. I know he has ran on being a moderate Democrat, but you can see in any of his proposals right here, he is definitely not in favor of universal health care. He's definitely not in favor of the new Green Deal. So you have people like Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, and AOC saying, whose team are you on, bro? Joe Biden's basically trying to say, I'm in the center. What do you think about that? Is he actually in the center? I'd love to hear your comments on that. What else? If you're looking for jobs, over the next 4, 5, 10 years, according to Joe Biden's plan, the biggest jobs will be in manufacturing, tech, innovation, green jobs, obviously, and engineering when it comes to infrastructure. Last but not least, Joe Biden is not exactly doing any favors for the top 1% or for corporate America. Would love to get your thoughts on that as well. Here's my take when it comes to a Joe Biden presidency. What can you do with this new president coming into office? Well, really, what you can do is you can control what you can control. What do I mean by that? You have no control over the stock market. You have no control of whether Congress passes any of these proposals whatsoever. But what you can control is your wealth and how much effort you put on a daily basis. So one thing I'll tell you, no matter who is in office, you need to focus on your wallet. When it comes to your wallet, what have we seen over the last basically 12 years, whether it was an Obama presidency or whether a Trump presidency, the stock market has gone up, up, up. So invest for the long term. Now here's a friendly reminder of the 6 things that you should focus on no matter who is the president. As you know, if you've seen any of my episodes, I call this the SAS 6 Principles of Wealth. Number 1 is you got to have a game plan for your money. You need to focus on income and limit your expenses. This is otherwise known as a budget. Number 2, you need to eliminate high interest debt from your life, whether that's credit card debt or car loans or high interest student loan debt. Get that out of your life. And the worst thing that you could have is payday loans and cash advances. Get that debt out of your life. Number 3, as we all know around here, you better stack cash and save that money before you can invest in the stock market. You need to have an emergency fund saved up. Number 4 principle of wealth is invest, and invest in the long term, as we just discussed, whether Trump's in office, whether Obama's in office. Now that Biden's going to be in the office, the stock market tends to go up over time. So play the long game and save to invest that money. Number 5 is insure and protect your biggest asset, which is you. Make sure that you have health insurance, make sure that you have life insurance if you've got kids, for sure, and make sure you look into disability insurance that will protect you if in case you get injured. And last but not least, what's your purpose? What are you doing with your free time? What are you doing if you could own your time? All this stuff you can't control, but you can control your health, your wealth, and your happiness, and make sure you're doing you and what you want to be doing. So that's it. That's this episode on the Joe Biden economic plan. 10 things that you need to understand when it comes to his presidency. I would love to know what's the number one thing on your mind. What's the number one thing on your agenda? I would love to check that out in the comments section. Again, if you have not seen my episode where I break down these 6 principles of wealth and how you can win the money game, check that out in this episode right here. And if you have not subscribed to Valuetainment Economics, please do so below. And as always, save that money.
All we talk is money. All we talk is money. All we talk is money. All we talk is